Oh, let's see if third time's the charm here. I'm having technical difficulties. The cyber gremlins are at work. Well, good morning, my magnificent friends. It's Friday. Welcome back to Tea with Sue. I'm Sue, your magnificence mentor. It's always a delight to be here with you on Friday mornings. It's 10:04 Mountain Time, and it's a glorious day. It's a beautiful fall day. I'm looking forward to getting out and just breathing in that crisp fall air and letting the sun beat down on me because winter's coming. So today I decided I wanted to talk about why forgiveness. So in order to do that, let's go back a little bit and think about, I want you to think back into your past. Now, it might be as soon as yesterday, or it might take you back to your childhood. Do you have any grudges, resentments, old hurts, disappointments, sadnesses from out of the past that might still haunt you today? Those pieces of nastiness, I guess I would call it, that it doesn't take much to trigger and it flares again. And you thought you'd set it aside, you thought you'd let it go, or maybe you thought you buried it deep enough and you didn't, and it's still there. Well, I'm guessing that you, like me, have some of that around you. There was a point in my life when all of that had built up so much that it caused me to have serious gallstones that attacked me. Well, if you've ever had a gallstone attack, you know what I'm talking about. It's extremely painful and not something you can get away from. So you've probably heard me talk before about how the body is a communication device. Well, the body doesn't actually like us hanging on to that negativity, all of those feelings that we've stuffed down or labeled not appropriate, and so, well, I shouldn't be feeling that way. I shouldn't be thinking those thoughts. And so we deny them and we push them away, or we do something to just not pay any more attention to them but of course, our body's paying attention, right? Our body knows that something, it's like this primordial stew that doesn't smell very good is bubbling away under the surface. And in an interesting kind of way, when those kinds of feelings are not dealt with, then they find pockets in the body to settle in. And that's where we get aches and pains sometimes. That's where arthritis can set in. That's where we get backaches or stomach aches, or that tension, that pressure, that not okayness that we felt is linked to our bodies. And at some point, our bodies might raise a little red flag and say, excuse me, you didn't deal with this. No, never mind. I don't have time to deal with that. Forget it. It's okay. I'm fine. I'm fine. I'm fine. And we push it away and we push it away, or we push it down and we push it down. Well, it's just like the pressure on a spring. You push it down and push it down and push it down and push it down, and you exert enough pressure so that it resists coming back up, and then all of a sudden it pops back up. Well, what you resist persists, right? So when we don't deal with whatever's going on with us in the moment and don't find a way to feel it and release it, it'll pop back up at odd moments, and often they're very inappropriate moments. And then maybe we do something even worse. So I can remember not that long ago, I didn't know I was feeling really, really anxious and out of sorts and stressed because I hadn't been paying close enough attention. And I was out driving on the road, and a driver behind me did something that I deemed particularly stupid. And when I saw them pulling into the same parking lot that I was pulling into, I wanted to just go over to that car and just shake my fist and berate the driver for doing something so stupid that potentially put my life at risk and somebody else's as well. And this rage just, and I'm going, whoa, Sue, this isn't like you. I'm usually a pretty calm driver, and I'm pretty forgiving about silly things that happen on the road, because sometimes I'm the one that's being kind of stupid. And so I thought, okay, something's going on here. So as I began to kind of unpack that and say, what's happening? And I realized that I had more stress in my body from circumstances around me than I had allowed in. I hadn't paid attention. I hadn't noticed it. And so then it was, all right, now it's time to deal with what is really going on here, because the symptoms are the symptoms, right? But there's something usually deeper. There's something below what we can see, below the sea level, right? So what is it? What's going on here? And as I worked it through, I began to use some of the tools that I knew to use that would help me feel the feelings and then let them go. And so, but the trouble is, I didn't know that for years. I didn't have the tools. I wasn't too sure how I was going to deal with stuff. And in fact, I was pretty convinced that, first of all, I wasn't allowed to feel those feelings in the first place. They weren't appropriate. It had been kind of trained out of me that, like, don't even look at your feelings, and forget about what you're thinking too, because if it's not down this particular path, you're on the wrong path. So I couldn't even give myself permission to feel what I was feeling. And so then they just got stuffed down and no, not allowed, not allowed, not allowed. Whew. That was a lot of pressure. Well, what ended up happening is that a lot of those bitter thoughts that I'd had as a kid, if you have siblings, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, you can't have siblings and not have some bitter, resentful thoughts from time to time. He did this to me. She said that to me. Mom always liked you best, on and on and on. And so it goes as we learn when we're little, and we squabble and have trouble sharing and all those kinds of things. So that because we want our parents' undivided attention, and we want life to be free and fun and glorious. And let's face it, reality bites. It's not always grand and glorious. In fact, lots of times it's the reverse. A friend of mine used to say, life is a sweet sour. Well, yeah, and sometimes it's bitter, and sometimes it's dreadful, and on and on. So we have feelings that accompany all of those myriad of scenarios, and often we're trained out of feeling them. And usually It's, well, you just got to survive. You just got to get through this next moment or this next day and so on. And that's fine. There are times when we set aside those feelings because it's not appropriate in the moment. We can be extremely fearful and yet need to take action. So we set the fear aside. We deny that we're even afraid in order to be able to take the next step. So we go on high alert and deal with that. But of course, every time our bodies go on high alert to deal with an emergency or a pressure situation, it floods our bodies with the chemicals, adrenaline and so on, that we need to deal with that. But then if we don't go back and deal with the original feelings, then that the toxicity of those chemicals, they're meant to drain away, they're meant to be dissipated. But if they sit in our bodies and in our tissues, it causes pain. That's our body's way of saying, we're not back to equilibrium yet. We haven't dealt with this particular thing. And if you have this nagging feeling that all is not well, there's a signal right there that there's something to be dealt with. So it's important, I think, that we take a look at some of those old things that hang on to us, those old feelings that are still there. So for me, when I think about it, in relation to my gallbladder particularly, I looked up, okay, what does gallstones and gallbladder have to do with us emotionally? Like, that's the symptom, but what's the underlying cause of that? And the underlying cause of that, according to Lise Bourbeau, is that there's bitter thoughts, such as jealousy and envy, and it's not feeling what you feel, not being allowed. Well, all of that can just calcify into what we call gallstones. And that calcification, if those stones can't move out of the body as they're meant to, if they get too big, you have a gallbladder attack. And trust me, that's not anybody's idea of a good time. So when I did some soul searching about that and thought, well, I don't want this happening to me anymore. Like I eventually had to have gallbladder surgery. So that was how I dealt with the physical part of it, reluctantly, because I did not want to have another surgery, but there was nothing left to me. So I did that. And then, okay, we're not doing this again. We're not going through more of that. So what's at the root here? And what I discovered was that I had been holding on to those bitter, nasty thoughts for years and treating them as if they were the crown jewels. And I'm going, well, that's not contributing to my happiness. That's not contributing to my well-being. This is not heaven on earth. This is hell on earth. And I did it to myself. And oh boy, well, that of course triggered a bunch of other not okay feelings. And I just wanted to do what I usually did, which was beat myself up for not dealing with that, for being in denial for so long, that it had created this whole physical thing in my body. And I wanted to rail at myself and be mad. And well, of course, oh, there's the spiral down, right? And you go, oh, gotta be a better way, right? Gotta be a better way. Well, there is a better way. The better way is forgiveness. Forgiveness is this bountiful gift that you give yourself. Part of forgiveness is compassion. It's that turning towards ourselves and feeling for us the way we often feel for other people. When we see other people who are sad or upset, or lots of times we have tremendous compassion for them because of what they're dealing with. But do we have compassion for ourselves? I haven't had a lot of compassion for myself over the years. I'm learning to have more and more compassion and say, Sue, you're doing the best you can. You've done the best you can. And so now you need to forgive yourself. And it's like this lovely shower of grace where you realize that you can make it right with yourself. You can give yourself the gift of saying it's okay. So the first step in this is allowing yourself to feel those feelings. Do I feel bitterness? Yeah, I do. It may or may not matter what the reason is, but just the fact that you allow that bitterness to wash over you and say, yeah, there it is. And what physical symptoms show that? Maybe it feels sharp or tight somewhere, or whatever, resentments. Okay, you feel those feelings. And then maybe you want to do some kind of a visual where you parachute those feelings upward, attach. It's kind of like this rock of bitterness that you tie to a balloon, and then you just let it go. You release it, and then any sadnesses, and you tie them up tight, and then you release it, and you just let that go. And of course, as it goes up, okay, you're giving it up, then and you allow it and you enable it to transform into something else. And then you allow yourself to feel lighter because you've let go of whatever it is that is holding you tight and binding you and pushing you down. Well, this is an ongoing exercise, all right? Because if we've lived more than 5 years on the planet, we probably have stuff that needs to be released. So I keep releasing and I keep releasing, and there's still more, but I find that it doesn't take as long to release, and there doesn't seem to be as much to release as there used to be. Part of it is because I do my best to feel the feeling in that moment. I don't wait for months and years before I acknowledge that I even felt it. So, the river of denial is long and wide. And sometimes we hang out in denial for so long that traveling in the other direction, it takes time to turn the boat, right? It just takes time. So, but that doesn't mean that it isn't worth doing, because it is. So I really encourage you. First of all, we have an absolute right to feel every feeling that's out there. I don't care what label you put on the feeling, whether you deem it to be good, bad, right, wrong, or indifferent, wonderful, exciting. It doesn't matter the label. First of all, we have a right to feel that. I know people who absolutely don't want to feel happy because they're afraid that if they feel too happy, then something bad will happen and they'll feel sad. And so they just don't feel anything. They're kind of neutral. And it's this gray area. Well, I've experienced that too. It's not any fun at all. And I would rather, how can you experience extreme joy if you've never experienced the depths of despair? So they're like this, right? And everything in between. Well, we know that extreme love can turn to either what we would label hate, or I tend to see fear as the opposite of love. Regardless, we have the absolute right to feel all those feelings. And we also have a responsibility to our bodies and ourselves to resolve any of those negative feelings, particularly that are causing toxic chemicals to shoot through our bodies. We absolutely have a responsibility. When we don't, then our bodies get stressed, and first it's a little stress and then it's a lot of stress, and the accumulation of all those stresses, scientists know, lead to some kind of disease, whether it's a heart condition, whether it's cancer, whether it's diabetes, you name all the top ones. You can find some scientific proof that says that a lot of the root of that is some kind of stress. So if you want a joyous life, if you want to create your brand of heaven on earth, then it's imperative that you look at ways to forgive whatever has gone on, and particularly forgive yourselves. Learn to practice self-forgiveness, where you say, okay, I did the best I could. And even if I knew it was, quotes, wrong, and I did it anyway, I was still doing the best I could. Now what am I going to do? So you always have a chance to choose again and have a better consequence in that. So that's what the rights and responsibilities are all about. We're responsible for ourselves. We're the only ones. We're it. Other people can help us, but at the end of the day, I'm it for me. I'm the only one who can make that big change inside myself and move forward. So, and I want to, and I keep working on it, and I keep doing it, and I keep experiencing better and better feelings, and it feels a lot better, trust me, than when I used to hang on to those thoughts that did not serve me, those feelings that I just couldn't express because I didn't feel I deserved to express them. You know you can do this because you're that magnificent. So this week, think about how you might forgive and who you might forgive. If there's somebody on the other end of the spectrum that you're finding difficulty forgiving, what about the situation can you forgive? And how can you find compassion? Because from their perspective, they were just as right as you were. Or from their perspective, you were just as wrong as they were. So, and you know that old saying, two wrongs don't make a right. Well, that's true. All you do is escalate the problem, and it spirals down worse and worse and worse. That's why family feuds get started, is because there's no forgiveness. There's no wiggle room to say, well, maybe they thought they were, for whatever reason, they did whatever they did. And I don't know why they did it, but I didn't like it. Well, at some point, somebody needs to start the process of forgiveness and unravel all of that knotted bitterness that's there. So see what you can do with that this week. See if you can tap into that well of compassion that I know you have, and see how you can forgive what needs to be forgiven. Because once you forgive, it rises up, okay? You can let it go. I forgave that. And sometimes there's situations where you might have to forgive 100 times, 70 times 7, I think it says somewhere in the Bible. So, and there's a reason for that when you keep forgiving and keep forgiving and keep forgiving, then that state of grace comes to you and you feel lighter. You're magnificent enough to do this. I know you can. So go take on the day. Enjoy your weekend. We'll look forward to meeting up next week on Tea with Sue. Thank you for being here. If you're enjoying these videos, please share them. Please subscribe to my channel. And I've told you before that you can always get all the rest of the series on my app, The Magnificence Mentor. Enjoy, my friends. We'll see you next week.